Okay, let's do so. First and foremost, normally we start with the minutes. Ken put them together for the last meeting, and we're going to put that off.
Oh, we are. You don't want me to move the minutes?
No, and
All right.
we'll move both the minutes of the last meeting and the minutes of this unusual meeting at the next meeting.
All right.
So let's pass on that. Okay, the whole purpose of the meeting was to have a conversation and get some feedback from the individual task groups on what has happened to date, pretty much since the beginning of the program, and what things are looking like for the next quarter. But looking back, an understanding of not only what has been done, but the challenges that have been faced and what we jointly and individually can do to resolve some of those issues. So I had sent out, frankly, an email that Brian had put together. Thank you, Brian. That summarizes the expectations of the types of things that you ought to put together on an individual task group basis for what has occurred in the past, and some thoughts about goals for Molly's coming in, and goals for the next quarter. A couple of things I'd like to. Hi, Molly.
Hi.
Survey's doing well. We'll talk.
I'm just looking it up right now.
Couple of things. First of all, everybody clearly has finished their individual task plans. But what I'd like to do, and let me share my screen here. First of all, find what I'm looking at. Maybe it's not up. Bear with me for a moment. There it is. Regretfully, it's not appearing.
Oh, you'll find it.
There it is. Okay. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
It's coming up, yep.
Okay. What I wanted to do is put together an idea, a reasonably straightforward, I wouldn't say oversimplified, but a characteristic process for each of the task groups. Now, these are characteristic, but there are task groups that are looking at it differently. I mean, case in point, the survey, the demographics, the financial modeling will be somewhat different than this. And there may be other things that, as we move on, will be different. But basically, it's reasonably straightforward for the individual task groups that we've done the task plan. Hopefully, at this point, we're starting to look at information not just about Bolton, as it stands now, but survey information that will be coming in not only from the survey that is in the process of being answered now, but the past EDC, the Common Survey, MAPC surveys, etc., as well as information from other towns, either comparable towns, meaning of the same size, generally same region, or towns that have progressed further. And I guess my motto here is, it's great to benchmark, but it's also really great to find good ideas. And I strongly believe when it comes to something like this, don't shade your eyes, plagiarize. Pick up that information and let's not reinvent the wheel. If something has been identified in the region or has been identified in other towns, maybe not necessarily in the region, use that and let's build from that. And then it goes off into, we're certainly going to have public fora, I would say, or 4E, in which we get input. And I would expect that in a reasonable period of time, with any kind of luck, we'll be in a situation where either we'll have room to use social distancing, or we will not have as much social distancing. Having said that, we have done with the MVP and other fora, we have actually done it on Zoom, and actually it's worked out very well. The MVP was, to me, a real indication of how well it can be done if it's well structured. And then from that, develop ideas qualitatively primarily, and then start looking at, with input from the population demographics, with social and financial assessment options, start looking at quantitative options for the future. And that's certainly something that's going to have to be looked at in terms of a realistic projection, not only with basically prioritizing them across the board. I will come up with prioritized ideas within particular areas. And one of the things that we've seen in the emails that have been sent around in the last 2 days is that there are a number of common goals and goals that are shared and goals that in developing them will require input from a number of groups. But however, I caution everybody that we need to be careful that we have a primary group that is responsible for pulling all that together, so that we don't have a bunch of redundant goals and people working redundantly on essentially the same thing. So that'll take a fair amount of coordination among the various groups. And then again, the expectation, and this is very traditional with plans of this type, that again, we'll have another public forum, be able to present what the options look like and get input on that. Part of that is developing buy-in from the overall community. And then as a result of that, put together something that now, and this is where a substantial portion of the challenge will be, take the financial model and get serious about what is realistic and what isn't, and what are the priorities that need to be done, both in terms of the impact and the importance to the town, and also the cost to the town. So that's, I just wanted to emphasize that across the board, that's going to be essentially what the process is. Now, there are going to be, a number of other things that will come into this. As I mentioned, financial modeling, demographics, and demographics, to the best of our ability, will have to come in reasonably soon as we try to develop quantitative options and be able to make quantitative projections. But at the same time, we've got to realize that the financial world, in terms of the town, with things changing with COVID-19, et cetera, is going to be something of a moving target. And also, we're not going to be able to see the results of the federal census until the middle of next year. So that will finally give us better information about at least where we are, and we'll have to calibrate that with whatever we've developed on where we're going. Now, I note down here, nota bene, if people can use quid pro quo, I can use nota bene. Each task group really, we have to develop a mechanism that coordinates the task groups. And I think that's going to be something that's going to have to be somewhat organic, but there will have to be a lot of communication. We've already seen that a number of task groups have come up with the same goal, and that needs to be pulled together with who's doing what in order to accomplish that goal, so that everybody isn't working on the same thing. And then establish for that particular goal, who's the lead and how that's going to be dealt with when we start bringing the whole plan together. So that's what I wanted to say on that. Sorry if I'm bouncing around a little here. The second thing, and Brian, I think it'd be best if you spoke to this, is a much better idea of what the expectations of the end product will look like. Not in a quantitative sense, but how it will be put together and what it'll look like. And Brian's putting together a document on that. Brian, you want to talk a bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So I've taken a look at a bunch of master plans for other communities, and I think the ones that have done the nicest job have first presented a really good snapshot of what the status quo is. And so what I'm going to do is create an outline that basically sets out all of the elements that I think we would need to pull together based on data that we have right now or can easily access right now to say, what is the lay of the land in Bolton as of 2020? And then, so I'm going to pull that together in an outline and then also put together an outline of the elements that we think we want to eventually be able to fill in terms of information, but obviously they're going to be sort of like placeholders. And I think that that will hopefully make some of the projects that each task group are working on more concrete, because we'll know, like, all right, we actually want specific chunks of our report to describe X, Y, and Z. And then the relevant task group can start working as if they're going to write that section of the report. I think hopefully it'll be a way for us to channel our thinking in a more concrete direction.
Good.
So I'll have that outline by our next meeting.
Yeah, that'd be very useful. Nice to know what the end product ought to look like and what the scope of it ought to be. The one other thing I wanted to say, and Ken and Brian and I have had a fair amount of discussion about it. Don't try to predict what's going to happen with COVID-19. For the time being, do everything you can to look at the things that are more concrete. And in the next 6 months, I'm very, very sure a lot of things are going to change, and we'll be able to perhaps more appropriately address COVID-19. The other aspect of that is inevitably there will be a recovery. We may be in a very different world. We may be working differently. I don't think that the demographics are going to change, but certainly things like transportation are going to change, and work habits and so forth. But that will come with time, and speculating on what that might be, I don't think is the best use of our time. But anybody have any comments on that?
Good point.
Okay, so why don't we just briefly jump into the individual task groups. I was very impressed, incidentally, with my inbox today, with a lot of thinking going into not only what has been done, but yeah, Stasha has the best backdrop, no question. Stasha,
Sorry to
welcome.
be interrupting. I didn't want to come on screen until you were done talking, Bob. It's good to see you guys. This is my class.
Hi, Stasha.
As you were talking about things changing, yes, I'm thinking of whoever's got schools, right? I mean, this is our classroom right now, so
Yeah.
certainly things are changing in the fall.
Yeah.
Yes, your classroom, your workroom, your
Right.
everything room. Anyway, so why don't we start at the top? Okay, we'll do it alphabetically. That'll be simple. Get my desk looks now the way it normally does. It's completely covered with paper. So, climate change.
Yo.
That's it, huh?
That's it. We're piggybacking on other groups and claiming as our accomplishment was Ken's overview of the MVP last meeting. It was very interesting for those of us who don't even know what it is. And it's probably going to help us determine the goals. So one of the goals was to go through that when it's final and pick out the recommendations that pertain to climate change. I mean, there's going to be recommendations that pertain to many groups here. But one specific one that was already recommended, Ken mentioned, was looking into the sheltering situation. What Bolton where and how and when Bolton would need shelters for disasters, or it didn't say pandemics, but we probably ought to put that in there too.
Well, that's an interesting question, because that was a question that I posed about 10 days ago to Rebecca, that it's ironic, but we're in a situation now where we potentially, with a hurricane season, have two totally contradictory responses that are required. That we have social distancing, and we got to bring people together in shelters. So think about that one. And she said, yeah, they're going to bring that up and they're going to have a robust discussion. But good point.
And then the only other thing I put in as a goal was sort of personal. I, like Brian, have been going through a lot of the other towns' master plans with the idea of what the end product will look like, more for illustrative reasons. You know, what graphs, charts, photos, maps we will want. And I am hoping to work with Rebecca or Erica to get one of the finalized maps. I think the wetlands map is pretty unlikely to change. Wetlands maps, just to start to see what kind of manipulation we can do to make it more user-friendly. And if I could build a base, we can see when and if we need other spin-off maps. And I'm hoping to work with Brian on his article for the newspaper, just sort of see what kind of graphs we want. And I'm sure, you know, it's going to morph into bigger stuff, but, you know, just for the summer, it would be good to sort of test out what we might want to be seeing.
Okay, great. Incidentally, that is a joint effort. In the resource area in Dropbox, under the steering committee, are a whole slew of master plans, communication methods, as well as a single sheet of paper that has the URLs and links to many, many more master plans. And I would urge you to go take a look at that and get a sense of what's there. It's pretty useful information. And by the way, if you turn up other things that are equally interesting, if they're massive, don't put them in Dropbox, but just add to that sheet that has the links to interesting stuff to look at. Okay, cultural and historic resources, Mary. Hey, Mary, you are muted right now. Okay, there you go.
Sorry about that. So we've been reaching out to different groups in town who provide cultural options. One of the things actually with this COVID is I have yet to contact the Cultural Council to see how this is going to affect them, considering that a lot of the grants that were approved for 2020 may not happen this year. So we've been doing that. I will say that contacting people has been difficult once this whole shutdown started, but we are working on it.
Okay, and you know, future, at least a reasonably near future activities, continuation of that?
Yeah, I mean, it's that, you know, Bob Bush is looking into historical properties and the demolition delay bylaw to see what properties could potentially be at risk. I have been trying to contact individuals for the indigenous sacred stone structures because we believe there are a few in town, and look at ways that they can be identified and preserved. So yeah, we're sloshing around, contacting people for different things.
Good. You know, one of the things that we asked, what other than obviously communication issues and the availability of resources, have you had any challenges to doing what you're doing?
Well, I would say the challenge is being able to contact people or access information with, you know, what's been happening since late March.
Yep, and I think everybody's faced with that. Paul Tassini isn't on, but let me talk a little bit about economic development. Erica's familiar with that. Basically, what we're doing right now is we put together a little series of questions, and we're going out to local businesses and asking them, you know, the statistical information, but probably much more importantly, and certainly the feedback I've gotten has made it important, is what do they see as things that will help them and help the town with respect to economic development. So we're slowly but surely collecting those. Again, it's difficult, not just the communication, but clearly people are in business are absolutely overwhelmed with trying to recover, trying to survive, and hopefully they'll get back. So that's what we're doing. The future is basically to put that together and augment the information that comes back from the overall survey. Another thing that we'll do, again, it's back to COVID-19, is meet with business owners, particularly the ones who have the large parcels on 117, and see what their thoughts are about occupancy, and how more business can be brought in to the existing you know, unused properties. So that's where we are. Okay, housing. Sasha, have you been involved in that?
So, admittedly, I dropped off the face of the earth when we went into quarantine, and just I've been here doing teaching. So I am I feel grossly inadequate to talk about it right now, but I am hopeful because the school year is ending. We have not met. However, I think some of the things that we were waiting for, and we'll certainly have an update by the end of the month. I was really interested to see if there was any survey results, and if that's something we're talking about later, just stop me right there.
Well, we have surveys coming in. I'm not sure that we've gotten to the point where we can look at them. What are we up to, 250 now, Molly? Molly?
Molly,
She's looking.
how many?
Race 41.
Okay.
Pretty
Well,
good.
there's specificity.
That's actually pretty good. It just went out, what, last week?
On May
Yeah.
27th. So yeah, it's trickling in. It actually is very funny watching the curves. It goes up on the weekends.
And we've had one paper ballot.
Yeah.
One paper ballot. So 342.
I
There's
talked to
about-
Pam today.
I have about 20 in my office that we received.
Really?
Oh, you did? Okay, I'll come pick them up.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
So I think, that will guide us a little bit in terms of some of, I think, at least the desires of the people in the town, where our focus should be. Certainly whatever happens to IGC, I'm sure people are looking at that, developers are looking at that. I don't know what that means. I know there's a lot of conservation land over there too. So that's like a whole, in my head, that's something to look into and see what that looks like in terms of future housing or not. And beyond that, things like Kia had mentioned, like with climate change, I know the MVP group was going to put out recommendations on potential zoning changes was one of their bullets in there. So, that we'll wrap that in as well. So I am in the process of reading the other towns' master plans, and we have talked as a group about meeting as a group and getting updated by the end of the month.
Good. Have you read the HPP report?
I've not read it in its entirety. I read the summary.
Okay, that's worth reading.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Absolutely. Incidentally, speaking of reading, I hope everybody has read the 2006 master plan. It's a real good document, and it will certainly inform us in moving forward with this.
I would also make a pitch for the
2018 open space plan, because if you're interested in maps, it has a slew of very interesting maps in it, and there's a nice amount for that time frame of what the status quo was in the town as well. So I think that that can be built on, since that's even newer than the master plan, that can be built on, and as we're structuring what we're doing.
Yeah,
This
and
one?
yeah,
Yeah.
and Rebecca, we've been talking about the maps, and she and I would guess, Erica, you have the layers of that in high res. I mean, it's basically GIS. It's high resolution stuff, so that's going to be available as well. And a lot of that homework has already been done, and not
Exactly right.
very little has changed in that respect.
It's really just a matter of making sure that we update those 2017 GIS data layers to incorporate any of, like I said, like you said, I don't anticipate there being a lot of changes, but we need to make sure that that is the case. So.
And it'll be very useful to have that base map as we look at other elements, the demographics of the town now and in the future. A la New England landscapes, but that's a whole different topic. And we need to learn a lot more before we comment on that.
Bob,
Okay.
since Stasha brought it up, can I ask whether anybody knows if any groups within the town are looking at all at the international as to what might happen or what the town would like to see happen or anything like that? Is anybody looking at that at all on any groups?
Not
Oh, but
that
it's-
I know of, Ken. I just, it seems like a logical jump to say there's some big, that's a lot of land and a lot of space, and who knows, which parcels are going to become available, if any, but.
Well, and it's the biggest taxpayer in town, so it's the largest business. I mean, I would
Right.
think I would even think EDC would be interested in either knowing what's going to happen, or if not helping
I
something
don't
good
think
to
they know
happen
what's
that's
going to happen.
beneficial.
Yeah.
Okay, but let's,
All in
I guess,
court.
I think it
just
would
was
be
curious
good
if
to
anybody
find out
knew.
who's going to do that and follow whatever ad hoc organization is doing that. I don't think it's something that the master plan wants to get into right away, but I think the first thing that needs to happen, and Erica knows a fair amount about this, is exactly what parcels are involved, what the zoning is on those parcels, and what could be done within that zoning, and to what degree a 40B could be put there, and how much control the town would have over that. So I
Right.
think there's some very basic knowledge before anybody talks about what can be
Right,
done.
and I was just curious
Erica just won
if
that.
anybody had begun to answer those questions that you raised.
What I
I
can
think
do,
Erica
Bob,
just won that one.
if it's helpful, what I can do, Bob, is put together like a little fact sheet of what we know now about that property, and
Okay.
maybe a map or something, if that's helpful.
Okay,
And then
but
we
there
can
are
kind
no-
of go from there.
There are no ad hoc groups that you're aware of that are looking at it
Well,
at all?
I've had, no, not that I am aware of, and I haven't really looked into it very much, because at the same time, I need to talk to Don Lowe, because I don't know if that's something Don Lowe wants to kind of take the reins on. So I'd like to have that conversation with him before, I step in, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it would, yeah.
No, I was just curious if anybody was.
Yeah.
That's
No, it'd be great to
It'd be
have
good
the
to know.
town take a lead on that through planning. I mean,
Yeah,
There could be some great opportunity, I mean, not at the
It's a
expense of
huge
other people. but-
opportunity. It's a
Yeah.
huge opportunity. And one of the things about the International is they own several parcels.
Exactly.
And some of them are under, forestry management or something. So if they ever were going to sell them, the town would get rights of first refusal. Or if it's going to go up for sale and some good golf course company buys it, you can bet they're going to want to maybe, do something. And frankly, I think it would be great. There's some of their parcels are back from the road. They're up against the Lancaster line. They could easily be, a place where retirees would want to move.
I don't want to cut off conversation, but I think it's a very big issue.
Yeah.
Erica, if you can
The
put
big
together
issue.
a summary of it, what
Happy
the
to do
zoning
so.
is,
what the zoning is on each parcel,
Yeah,
because
it
there's,
varies.
there's a lot, yeah, it varies.
Also,
think that-
Susan, to find out what Dawn knows.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to step on toes.
But it would be
Exactly.
great to have, I mean, how many towns have done a wonderful job of having the town government pull together with private citizens and come up with an ad hoc organization that really looks at it in depth, works with us in terms of the alternatives. But I don't believe it's appropriate for the master planning committee to dive into that alone per se, but simply support it. Okay. Municipal facilities and services, Ms. Gerken.
Municipal facilities and services. Okay, let's just start with municipal buildings. You have to figure out what you have before you can do anything past that. So I've been working with Joe Lynch and to look at all the municipal buildings and decide what's the state of the state, from building envelope to electrical systems and mechanical systems and the like. We pretty much have the library, the public safety, the Houghton, and the town hall done. We still have a bunch of other ones to do, but they're smaller ones. They're like the transfer station and the old fire station and, you know, Persons Park and the radio tower, that kind of stuff. So they're smaller ones, but the biggies are pretty much done. Also, I met with Rob Frieswick, who's the head of facilities for Neshoba, and wanting to know the state of the two schools and what the schools were looking like for, number one, how much work were they going to need in the next 5 to 10 years. And he had this wonderful report that he had done in 2018 from a group called the Hogan Associates, that they basically did a building assessment on both Florence Sawyer and Emerson. So they're pretty much done. That's at least finding out what you have right now. I have been searching, well, I sort of stumbled on to the fact that drawings and construction sets and for town buildings are sort of all over the place. And the two places that are majorly found are over at the region in one place and then at town hall. So Eric and I have been sorting through the ones at town hall and sort of trying to organize them, so at least we know we have drawings for the buildings. And some we were not going to have more drawings for. And so that's where that is. So that will continue through for the next 2 or 3 months as I sort through all the rest of the buildings and basically make up a spreadsheet on this, in 2022, these are the things that will have to be done to Florence Sawyer or Houghton to maintain the building, kind of thing.
What about municipal services in terms of where things stand and where they can be going?
Municipal services, I have, I think the only way to look at municipal services is on cost data. Square footage of offices, cost to the town of each municipal service. And then once you have that, you can compare it to surrounding towns. I started looking at surrounding towns. The problem is that all towns do not put their data down in the same format. So, and I've read a lot of budgets in this town in my payday, but it takes a little, sort of swimming through to figure out what they have. Even if you go to their annual reports, it's a lot of mixed stuff. So I'm slogging through that slowly but surely. And the towns I'm doing are Berlin, Lancaster, Harvard, Boxborough, Stowe, and I threw in Carlisle only because it's a very similar town to Bolton. It's got a main road running through it. It sort of the same sort of makeup farms and such. And they're about 5 years ahead of us. So I thought that might be a gauge on, where we're going.
It is. It's an excellent example.
Yeah. So, and I know people there.
And Carlisle is doing a master plan right now, and they just had their public forums right before the quarantine.
Oh, they did.
Very interesting. Yeah.
Excellent timing.
So we
Yeah.
should be following them pretty closely.
Yeah, and they're nice people to deal with. I can go up there and see a friend when I'm there, so because I used to live there years ago. So that's where we are on those two. And schools, Bob and I have met with the principal and with the superintendent, and I think pretty much schools are going to be on hold until we get through September, and they come up for air.
Yeah.
I think they're going to be so swamped trying to figure out how they're going to handle this that they're not going to have any time to talk to us.
And they're not going to be able to make much in the way of projections until,
Right. I do have for schools, Brian, I told Brian this, then we discovered that Christopher, Brian's son, wasn't on the list. I do have all the numbers for 0 through 5 for kids who
Maybe.
will be going into school. Then we have to add 1 for Christopher.
so we've already established an action out of the master plan. Put Christopher on the list.
Right, put Christopher on the list. And figure out why Christopher didn't show up on the list.
Well, and are there others like Christopher that aren't on the
Well,
list?
yeah, are there?
You may have just done.
No one with that
You may have
curly
just
hair,
shown the
though.
list as no good.
Well, no, we have a lot. There are a lot of kids. So.
Okay, Mr. Sterling.
Not much happening in the master plan open space at the moment. Personally, I've been spending more time on dealing with the town parks and the beach and so on, kind of on and off. So I have to ask for some room there. I think the other thing that indeed we just talked about that comes to mind is the one logical place where there would be potential open space is the famous golf course, and the whole thing seems to be up in the air. I don't know if does it make sense to ever talk to realtors with their ear to the ground on any large parcels, or is that they likely not to talk too much about something in their own interest?
They may and may not. It depends on their perspective.
Okay.
I think, if that can be pulled together with the town and make sure that if Don's doing this or he's coordinating with somebody who is, I think it's very critical that whatever investigation is done, whatever conversations occur are well coordinated. Because things can get out of hand with large parcels in real estate.
Sure.
And it's really easy to step on toes.
But I mean, Ed, your advantage is that you do have the 2017 OSRP. So
Well, there you go.
so
Mike
that's
Keating, right?
yeah, it's a little like the MVP. I mean, there's a lot of information there.
Right.
Okay, Brian, you want to talk about population?
Sure. I actually just wanted to briefly make sure everybody in this group is aware of the data sources that we have and the limitations that are maybe involved in those sources. So every year, the town clerk's office sends out their town municipal census, but they're really only collecting information on numbers and ages. So at this point, they don't collect information about sex. They don't collect information about race, anything like that. So our only source of demographic information is the federal census, and then they do like a rolling American community survey, which samples communities, but it's not as comprehensive as the decennial census. And so I think, setting aside school information, I think that right now we have access to basically everything we need to get a current picture of what Bolton's population and demographics look like. I would say, though, that we'll want to obviously refresh specifically the demographic stuff, like race, income, occupation, poverty, all that. We'll want to refresh that after the decennial census becomes available. Probably in the spring of next year. The other thing that I wanted to mention on the topic of population and demographics is, so while I don't think there's going to be much data collection or analysis that we need to do over the next several months, I do think it's worth having this group consider whether there are any conversations that maybe ought to be facilitated over the course of this master planning process when it comes to what does Bolton look like? What do we want Bolton to look like? What are the barriers that prevent Bolton from being an accessible community to some folks? And I think that that is a population and a demographic conversation. And I just wanted to raise that with this group.
Yeah,
So-
that's a really good point, and it's something that we really haven't, and we need to think about a vision. And I think that's a key element of the vision, if
Yeah.
not the vision.
Right. So send me ideas, send me an email, let me know what you think, but I think we should just kind of keep it on our radar. Did you want me to talk about finances too while I'm at it?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So just to zoom out for a second, I will say that Bolton is like every other community in the state right now, dealing with massive uncertainty about what finances are going to look like for the next year or two. Every December, the State Department of Revenue has a big hearing where they convene economists and they basically give a projection, which is what the state legislature uses to develop its budget for the following fiscal year. And so I think it'll be interesting for us to see what happens in November or December of this year, because right now, the guidance that a lot of municipalities are following is that state revenues or state aid is going to be down roughly 15%. Could be even higher than that. Bolton at this point isn't a community that relies a lot on state aid, but the school district actually does rely quite a bit on state revenue from different accounts. So I don't want to be too long-winded except to say that there's a massive amount of uncertainty that makes it difficult to really develop a surefire financial projection model, but we're still plugging away at different things. So we're not going to sit still. I mean, part of it is just like keeping informed as to what information we're getting from the state on a weekly and monthly basis, which I'm doing.
Okay. Thanks very much for that.
Sure.
Okay, I'll let's see, who can I put on for public outreach and communication? Abby, you want to talk about that?
Well, sure, maybe.
I can, but I thought somebody else ought to.
So for what we've done, like the challenges, getting people like active, kind of like on social media and stuff has been kind of tough. Clearly the survey is doing great though, so that's good. But yeah, and for goals, I think we haven't really talked about what we want for the future just because we don't really know what we're going to need to do really yet.
Well, I think, continuing to do what you're doing, I think is critically important.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, maintaining momentum. We put out one thing in the print media. Brian's working on another that'll go out, but just keeping out there and making sure that the whole process is visible with the ulterior motive express motive, of keeping people engaged. And I think it's critical that we become an organization that informs people and informs ourselves, obviously, so that we can do our job better. But two-way street, and you can talk about the things that have been done, and Erica, you probably want to talk a little bit about the town website, which is you've done a fantastic job on.
Yeah, so the town website is basically at this point built out as far as I'm concerned. It's really just at this point updating it as it needs to be updated. It's got the survey information on there now. It's got links to both Facebook and Instagram. It's got sort of an overview of what the master plan is. It has bios and pictures of the master plan steering committee. So if you haven't taken a look at that, Kia did an amazing job with the bios, and it really, really punched up the website. it also has the more detailed documents that Bob put together. So anyone that is truly interested in this process, if they go to the website, they're going to get a lot of information at this point, and as well as contact information, moving forward if they want to know more or want to get involved. So it's in a good place.
So in this case, our job is to lead them to the water, not to get them to drink. Because once they
Yeah,
get,
and I'm trying to help Abby and Megan in that sense. I've been doing, well, in my mind, I think I've been doing quite a few, but maybe not. The news and announcements, that seems to reach a lot of people through the website. So, every time we have sort of a milestone, I've been doing a news and announcement associated with that. And then I also updated the Houghton Building sign, which I had never done before. And I have to say, that's a pain in the butt.
Isn't it a pain in the
So,
ass?
welcome to
You're
the
lucky you haven't
hats
had
off
it.
to anyone that's done that before. That took me so much longer than I thought it was going
Yeah.
to. I was like,
Oh,
oh my
yeah.
God, this is crazy. But it's up. So
well, it's a digital sign. You use your digits to do it.
exactly.
Okay, but I think that team has done an absolutely spectacular job. And it's going to be challenging in the future to
Yeah.
maintain interest, to do things in both the non-print media and the print media that engages people and gets them to get excited about it and learn more about it. And then, of course, we're going to have to give a lot of visibility to forums, as well as figuring out how we're going to do it. But that's a critical thing. We certainly did that back in the long-range planning days, where actually we did it at town meeting. We did it at the Sawyer School cafeteria. We did it in lots of places. So that, we need to have forum, and we need to make sure that we know how to manage those. That's the other challenge. Facilitating a forum makes the job of town moderator look simple. Not that it is simple. Okay, who's on next? Schools, Penny.
Yeah, schools
You've
are,
already said it.
Shorty covered.
we basically, they really don't have a lot of demographic data. They don't have projections. I have more projections, I think, than they have right now on the next 5 years of kids, at least from Bolton. I think they're just so swamped that we're not going to get anything, as I said, anything out of them till September.
One thing came out of both the municipal facilities and the schools that I think is an important consideration that we as the master planning team need to think about, and that is document management. How does
big time
town deal? I mean, if you go talk to Pam, she and her team, Erica and company, have a great system, but then you start looking for things, and as an engineer, a construction manager, et cetera, I really like to have not only all the current documentation, but at least the critical elements of the history of facilities, so that you can start looking at not only what the condition is, but what it was going to take to reuse it and what it takes to expand it if necessary. And I think that's something we as a group need to think a little bit about. Is there something we can do to develop an action plan to start pulling together a document, an integrated document management system that's accessible?
Because Bob and I got to walk into a room at the grade school that is used by the town. It's basically their room. It's a big storage room. And I think it was fair to say it was fairly terrifying.
Yeah, basically, drawings all over the place.
Yeah.
At Emerson?
At Emerson.
Yeah.
So
bid packages, different versions of the same bid package.
yeah, and stuff going back 20 years.
So, right.
So obviously that's a long-term work in progress.
But as a minimum, I think the recommendation is not to solve the problem, but develop a plan to solve the problem.
Right.
So a document management plan and what needs to happen to do it. And being an intensely compulsive project manager, that has always been very high on my agenda. Okay, we've talked about Well, we've talked about the survey somewhat, but kudos to Molly.
Yes.
Pulling that one off was quite exciting,
Yeah, sorry.
and it really came together. Clearly, it's
Yeah.
What's the deadline?
27th.
27th. So, yeah, no, we have a lot of good data in here already. There's some scathing remarks, as you can imagine, but some also very interesting ones. You know, I'll obviously talk more and more about it, especially once the survey closes and we can start compiling the data. You got my email. I think, you know, basically thank you to everyone who helps get the survey to where it needs to be. And future challenges, I think, would be just compiling the paper surveys into the same sort of similar format as the electronic ones, and kind of then analyzing the data. But Bob,
And you said you were going to look into how the best way you wanted that done, right?
You know you can enter them into the system yourself, right?
that's an idea. I didn't think about
Because
that.
that's what I did with the ones for the common. Is that as the administrator of the thing, you can go in and just put it in, and it takes it takes however long it takes to put one in, but I would just take a piece of paper, put it in, and set it aside, and check it off, so you're not double counting or anything. And
Super.
so in that one, we didn't ever have any paper ones we had to analyze. We put them all in the system.
Well, that's what we were
recommend you
planning
do
on
that.
doing, Ken, but Molly was going to find out the best way to do it with the
That's
system
okay.
she's working on.
Okay, well, I just did them one by one, entering the data.
There's what, 21 so far?
21. So there may be more, so I may have to divide and conquer whoever
Yeah.
has.
I'm gonna say, if you need
minutes.
help, I work for wine. No.
I do too. You can come over. We can sit on my back porch and socially distance
Yeah.
with our laptops.
Be happy to
Molly.
help.
That actually
Yeah.
might not be a bad idea, just to get.
And in fact, if you do want to split them up, because it's online, right? So any of us could help you?
Yeah, if I can get other people access to this survey to enter the data, that's fine.
Yeah, it's getting access because once you've taken the survey, you can't get back on again.
But as an administrator, you
But
can.
as administrator, she does,
Yeah.
and so
Yeah, she can. So
if
she
the
has to
helpers,
set us
if the
up.
helpers had access. Anyway, I think that I would recommend that.
Okay, good.
Super.
Molly, just out of curiosity, how does SurveyMonkey output the data? Like, what do you get from it? Is it like a spreadsheet? Is it?
I will
I'm just
share my
curious.
screen right now, actually. I haven't downloaded or dumped it into, can you see my screen?
Yep.
Yeah.
I haven't dumped it into Excel, but I know you can, because I used to do that. But yeah, I mean, right now it's very pretty. It makes some documents some bar graphs for you. Clearly, we need some more restaurants in town, people.
Unlikely.
That's too bad. It would be nice. So actually there's a lot of good, interesting data in here, but very colorful. But I think especially the aspects where people really were curious about data. I know transportation was a big one. You'll have a lot of data to suss out and think about. People really like driving their cars, and probably more so now. So yeah, it's very colorful. I haven't downloaded it per se, but I'm pretty sure it's into Excel. I have to look into maybe getting the bar graphs in like this, so when we present it, then they can be in this pretty format. So
Where does it show the individual comments or extra notes and things like that? Do you just get a list of those, or is that embedded into some other
individual responses are here. Pulling it up. So yeah, I mean, you can go person by person. So if you find a particularly irate person, you can find out who they are, kind of. But yeah, you can, basically figure out who wrote what.
I see.
So that's how it looks.
Got it.
Yeah, it's wonderful how candid they are and how contradictory they are.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, it was a good exercise. Like when I filled mine out, I was like, you know, it definitely gives you pause for thought. I think we did a good job with how we lined it up. You know, obviously look at these things and you're like, oh, I would have done that differently now, but you know,
Yeah, I can do that forever.
I
Yeah.
know, I'm a project manager, Bob. I
Well, I thought it
know.
was interesting in our discussions with the business folks. Two things come up regularly. One is we need to have more businesses on 117 because there's a lot of traffic there. And then the other one is I can't
There's
get
a lot
my
of
business
traffic
on
on
117 because there's too much traffic, which I found
Yeah.
fascinating.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay, let's move on to transportation improvements.
Ken, you want me to go first?
Sure, if you like. Mary and I met the other day and talked through some of the things. And of course, the immediate problem that you just mentioned of too much traffic on 117 has not existed for the last several months. And it may be different in the future. So this is one of the areas where probably we're going to end up going slowly in what we look at. But we are going to get to the part of the left side of your flow chart, Bob, and talk to other towns. Mary's already been reviewing a lot of other people's open space plans, and we're going to have conversations with especially Stowe and what it's been doing with some of the surrounding towns about commuter shuttles and things of that sort, and just see what they're doing and the problems that they've been having and things of that sort. And then we're in parallel with that, we're sort of in touch with Joe Lynch about what his objectives are and where the needs are for the infrastructure. And I guess that could be affected by the amount of state aid, because if the state aid Chapter 90 reduces, then we have less money to work with on the roads. But so we're gathering information, I guess, is the best way to put it really.
Next steps?
Well, what I mentioned of meeting with the other towns to understand the things that they're doing and could do, and to the extent that we haven't been talking with some of the local potential users, after things slow down a little bit for them, talk a little bit more, particularly the Council on Aging, as to what assistance they may need in some of the van-related things and stuff like that.
Are you going to talk to MAPC and MRPC? And Magic, for that matter?
Well, we've been going to Magic meetings, and they did a healthy aging study that included Bolton and the surrounding towns and had some demographics, and the increase is really not just in Bolton, it's in a lot of the towns around, of the number of elderly, and so they've looked at some of that, and so yeah, we're looking at and talking with those people. We haven't sought any specific data from Magic or anything, but to the extent that they're doing any studies that involve Bolton, we're definitely working with them on that and staying in close touch.
We attended their workshop on transportation and housing
Right.
for seniors, that healthy living workshop. And as a result of that, they generated a report, which Ken, you and I have. And also, we met with Joe Lynch to go over what he saw as future needs for roadway safety and improvements looking forward. I've also gone through all the town documents on road safety, and I looked at the recommendations and I made a list of what had been completed and what needed to be completed. So, you know, we're still working on researching and moving outside of the Bolton area to to see what other towns are doing, and I mean, that's,
Please, if you get information from the regional planning commissions, magic as well. I think make sure that the pertinent information gets shared with the other task groups. Case in point, the aging population, housing needs to know about that. In your case, Mary, cultural and historic needs to know about that, because there will be significant community cultural aspects of that if people have already done work and thought it through, and particularly if they've come up with some innovative approaches and quantitative projections, that'd be great for the other teams working on that. Okay, and last but not least, water and sewer. They've done the task plan. They've put together a fairly extensive document on sources of information. I'm delighted to say that Chris is hopefully going to return to our fold. He's home. He's very much aware and awake, and he would like to do something, which will make Sarah very happy.
I know I talked to him this week, and he's got a couple more procedures to go through, but I talked to him and I said, all right, you're fine you've got your own computer that you can put on your lap, right, Christopher? And he said, yes. And I said, so you can do Zoom meetings. And he said, I don't know anything about Zoom. I said, Christopher, if I can learn how to do it, and I'm the low man on the totem pole, so can you. So he's happy to, I think by the end of next week, he'll be back, telling us what, which is good news.
Good. Okay, well, that's about what I was interested in. Brian, any other thoughts?
No, I think it was good to hear from everybody, and I think when we meet at the end of this month, we'll have a good path cleared ahead of us.
Yep. And someday we hope we can meet actually together.
I know, right? Yeah.
I want to raise a non-virtual glass.
Sure.
Okay, well, if there's nothing else, thank you very much. And
Thank you,
we'll
everyone.
talk and see you at the end of the month. Thanks.
I'll see you next week, Erica. I'll pick up those surveys.
What time are you coming?
Well, you're not there tomorrow. It's Friday.
No, I know. What day are you coming?
I don't know,
Next
whatever you tell me to. I just follow your instructions.
You might have to wait till the 27th, because people might do it at the very end.
Well, I know, but no, I'm just picking them up as we go along.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so we don't, yeah. Sometime next week, whenever you're in.
So I am in the office Monday and Wednesday. So anytime Monday and Wednesday,
All
you're
right,
you're welcome to come in and get them.
Plan on me being there Monday.
Sounds good.
Good enough.
I'll call you.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Take care, Bob. Thank you.
Bye.